welcome to Off My Shelves, and this is a look at The Treasure of the Black Swan by Paco Roca and Guillermo Corral. And yeah, let's get underway. Maybe one day I'll show you the outtakes of how many times it took me to say Paco Roca, but for now we'll move on with our lives. This is The Treasure of the Black Swan, published by Fantagraphics, and it is the amazing non-fiction tale of treasure found off the Gibraltar Strait, and who owns that treasure, what happens to that treasure, and the whole story behind the discovery and then the proliferation of this treasure, really. But before I get too far into the story, the build of this book, there's no dust jacket whatsoever, but as ever with Fantagraphics, really high quality book design. The Treasure of the Black Swan writing on the spine and on the front is embossed, so it's got a nice texture to it. And yeah, the pages inside are not glossy, they matte finish paper, it's full colour images, and it's about 200 or so pages, I think. And yet sewn binding, fantastically well made book. And I will tell you now that I loved every second of this book. It is the second Fantagraphics book in recent weeks that I could not put down and read it all in one sitting practically. And I loved the artwork so much that I kind of went out and bought a lot more Paco Roca books, because I hadn't read any of his work before previously. I had heard of him, heard of The House and a few other books, but never read anything. But this was the first, and certainly I love the artwork. I've seen some people online compare it to Tintin. I can see that kind of resemblance, but equally it's got much more action and pace and characterization to it than Tintin, I think. I think there's a tendency in comic books to be really impressed and overly impressed with this hyper detailed, hyper realistic artwork, you know, maybe like Alex Ross or someone like that. But I get far more impressed when someone does a simplistic art style, a few lines, but they convey everything. They convey emotions, they convey a scene, they convey everything you need, really, just with a few lines, and he is a real expert at that, I think. But anyway, enough about the art. I will get on to the story. The story starts out in the Gibraltar Strait, and a team of, you know, deep sea archaeologists, treasure hunters, whatever you want to call them, under the company name of Ithaca, they discover treasure. And it's not the treasure of a ship called the Black Swan. The Black Swan is this name given to a mythical type of vessel, really, a mythical treasure trove. And what that means is a treasure trove that is perfect, that has been untouched, unspoilt, and has everything there for the taking, really. A bountiful treasure. That's what the Black Swan is. It's a nickname given to a treasure that everybody really hopes for in the treasure hunting business. And certainly they find it, and it's Frank something or another, I can't remember his name, who is in charge of the Ithaca company that start getting the treasure out. But then we jump to the Ministry of Culture in Madrid, and we start following a guy called Alex, who is just starting under the Minister of Culture, really, in Madrid. And at the same time, they're already transporting this treasure from Gibraltar over to Florida to be stored, to be catalogued, and they're trying to keep a low key on everything, because they know that they weren't necessarily allowed to be looking for treasure in the place that they found the treasure. And essentially this story is very much a cat and mouse game. The culture ministry and the people who work for the government in Spain are trying to catch the Ithaca company out. They're trying to prove that they got this treasure from a part of the water that they weren't allowed to be in the first place. And plus, it's of national importance that they get this treasure back. But to prove this, they have to prove a lot of different things. They have to prove that the boat was in a place that it wasn't supposed to be, that it wasn't allowed to go. Then they also have to prove what the ship was. They have to actually prove that the ship was a Spanish ship, not a British or French ship or some other ship. They have to prove outright that Spain has a claim on the treasure. And so Alex eventually meets Elsa, who is an expert on the Ithaca Company and on the history of these sunken galleons and these historical sites. And she already knew before Alex got in her office that Ithaca were trying to pull a fast one to get this treasure away from Spain and basically reap the rewards for themselves on the private open market. And so the story really revolves around Alex and Elsa, along with the legal team and many other people within the Spanish government, trying to fight the Ithaca Company and Frank, who is the head of that company, to basically prove that the treasure is Spain's and is a heritage asset of Spain that needs to be given back. So there's tons and tons of different layers going on in this story, really. First and foremost, they need to identify the ship. Then they need to figure out how Frank actually found and discovered the ship in the first place. But they actually have to prove that he was in a place that he wasn't supposed to be as well. And so there's all these different things going on, and they have to amass all this amount of evidence to make sure that the treasure comes back to Spain. Brilliantly though, there is also a really tender and sweet romance story going on between Alex and Elsa. They both around the same age, you know, Elsa a little bit older, but they start really liking each other the more time they spent, and there's this great love story that's really tender and really a nice part of this story all the way through. And as you may imagine as well, it's never straightforward trying to outdo the company that Frank works to. And it's great how this whole book really tells the story from the Spanish government's point of view. You get a little inkling as to Frank and his company and their opinion and their personality, but not much. They're always this kind of shadowy corporate figure who's having help from other shady government organisations, and they're all creeping in and trying to stop the Spanish government actually in their tracks before they get the information they need to take this treasure off Frank and his company, because this treasure is worth a hefty amount of money. One of my favourite things about this book is when they discover the ship as well, when they talk to a historian and he starts retelling the story of the ship and its real name and everything like that. The book actually switches to almost like a journal, like the page colour changes, the font changes, and you get just one image per page, and it tells you this potted history of this very unique Spanish ship and how it came to end up where it ended up. Now, you could well be familiar with this story already. You may well have seen a TV series or news reports or anything on it before, because it is well documented, I think. But I went into this not knowing much at all, and for me it was just a fantastic story because it was twisting and turning, and you were never quite sure whether they were actually going to achieve their goal of getting the treasure. But even if they could get the treasure, how are they actually going to get it from Florida all the way back to Spain? Because it's a gigantic amount of treasure. How are they going to physically move it from one place to another when they really haven't got any help whatsoever from the American government or from Frank's team? Loved every minute of this book. The artwork is fantastic, the story was engrossing, and I will definitely reread it because I love a good non-fiction story, and particularly one that has history at its background, and basically it's a kind of combination of historical research actually helping a modern day country reclaim a historical treasure, and I love that type of thing. So yeah, that's all I got to say about the treasure of the Black Swan. It is well worth anyone's time, I think, and thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Of the Black Swan by Paco Roca.